evolve and you're always going to change. And I think a lot of women, we get into this like pitfall where we get married, we're in this like bubble, and then we get disappointed and our husband, does something or whatever. He's not fulfilling on an expectation that we have. And then we're living with so much resentment and disappointment. And, it really creates this really big disconnect from ourselves and from our partners.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning into this episode of Mom Talks with Christa. I have an awesome episode for you guys today. Yana Gil de Montes is here, and she is from The Conscious Married Woman. And we are covering all kinds of topics to help your relationship today. And it was just so cool talking to her. She talks about the biggest roadblocks when it comes to keeping us from the marriage we want to have, and the most powerful foundation that every thriving marriage should have. So we had a great conversation. It was just really cool about talking about inner work and what we can do to make ourselves better in our relationship and so much more. So if you have questions about your marriage or relationship, this is one you definitely don't want to miss. And of course, don't forget to stick around until the end, because we have our Mom Tales of the Week, where we have this week's question that I posted on social media. And I'm going to read off some of our favorite responses. So you'll have to stick around to see if we chose yours this week. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Yana. This is a topic we haven't had on the show before, so I'm really excited to kind of dive right in and learn more about it. So first to get started, can you just tell us a little bit about you?
Thank you so much, Krista, for having me on. I am Yana, and I have been married for 10 years. I have two girls, ages 7 and 8. And, I've been a marriage coach for 4+ years. Just to share a little bit about my journey and how I got into marriage coaching and how I, kind of went down my path. For me, my marriage was kind of my opportunity to quote unquote awaken and really look at my life and look at like what wasn't working and really make a choice of whether I was, to really walk down a path of, like feeling like when things aren't working, of taking responsibility for them, or awaken and actually take a conscious approach and look at how I can be responsible for the things that weren't working and make a change and really kind of change the paradigm and the trajectory of what's possible. And in my marriage, I really went to work on that really deeply, because when I got into my marriage, what I found myself doing was basically reacting in the ways that I learned from my parents, grandparents, society, and what kind of I think most people do, and just following the path that we learned. And I realized that it just wasn't going to work out. Like if I just kept continuing to react in these unhealthy patterns that I learned from my parents, my marriage wasn't going to work. I'm trying to shorten it, but really like that was, my biggest opportunity. And that's why I really focus on conscious marriage rather than let me fix, or let's fix, your partner, or let's fix you. It's not about fixing. It's more like bringing consciousness and awareness and changing the paradigm and the trajectory of what's possible.
Oh, awesome. I love always hearing about like the journey of how each person kind of got into, the work they're in. And I think it's so cool, because I think a lot of times we go towards work that has really like touched us deep, where it's been something that is really important to our own kind of personal journey. So for anyone that's listening, what is a conscious marriage, and how can someone kind of start veering towards a more conscious marriage?
Well, first of all, I think that conscious marriage is a context. It's a point of view that you take on, that you really use your relationship as an opportunity for growth. And, when I first realized that my marriage is mine and it's my vehicle for me to grow as a human being and to evolve and to learn, and every kind of conflict and everything that we struggle through in our marriage is an opportunity for me to really do that inner work and to grow. It was like an eye opener for me. Well, eye openers is like undermining it. It was like a wake up moment where was like, oh, like he's not there to make me happy. My marriage, I think we grow up really believing that once I get married, once I have kids, that I'm going to live this fairy tale and everything is just going to work out. And I know in motherhood, like I've experienced that as well. It's like, I'll just know. And a conscious marriage is really looking at your marriage from a different perspective. Like it's not there to fulfill you in any way or to make you whole. You are whole as you are, and your partner is whole as he is. And everything that's, experienced inside the relationship is really there for you to grow and expand. So it's that bigger commitment that partners have to grow and expand as individuals. And then, when you do that, you're pulled towards that purpose. You're pulled towards, to making a world and your family a better place because of the work that you do individually.
I love what you just said about, like society, like kind of teaches us to think once you're married, it's that happily ever after. It's like those Disney movies, we grew up watching. And so I think we kind of, think, oh, once you find your person, you get married, it's perfect. Everything's great from then on. So I love this concept of, you are whole as a person, your spouse is a whole as a person. So you have to kind of, find what works in your marriage for, it's not going to be just this happily ever after, automatically.
Yeah, and that you evolve and you're always going to change. And I think a lot of women, we get into this like pitfall where we get married, we're in this like bubble, and then we get disappointed and our husband, does something or whatever, he's not fulfilling on an expectation that we have. And then we're living with so much resentment and disappointment. And, it really creates this really big disconnect from ourselves and from our partners.
Yeah. And so what do you think are the biggest roadblocks that keep us from having the marriage we desire?
So we actually call it inside of our program the big lie. And the big lie is this like really big lie that nobody really ever talks about openly. And a lot of us aren't even conscious that it's there. It's something that we, all of us, have been deeply kind of programmed to believe is that a marriage or a relationship, or I should say a marriage, especially since we're talking about that, is never really going to work out. Like, not really. Like, there's always going to be a point where we're going to get disappointed, and it's not, even though we hope and we see these movies growing up and, we have these ideals about like the fairy tale life. But the truth is, if you really look at your life, like 99% of people, we don't have relationships around us that are perfect. Like, it's just not possible. Even if your parents had a great relationship, there's always something that we look for that's like, oh no, but I don't want that and I don't want this. So subconsciously, we have this belief going into the marriage that, I can't trust him, or whatever those beliefs are. Like, for me, is like, I can't count on men. I was going into the marriage with this belief that was really deeply rooted, but it was like, and then when my husband, had his failures, it was like the belief was proved to be true. Like, I had evidence, and then we start gathering this evidence. So, it's a huge roadblock if we're not being honest about it, if we're not actually being open about it. It really is like this veil, I think, that we relate to our partners through to marriage, through the relationship that we have to marriage, is through that veil a lot of times, through that lie.
So do you think it's important for people to kind of understand and ask themselves their own kind of like, like you're kind of saying, like your deeply rooted like beliefs about marriage or relationships? Like, is there a good way for them to kind of like almost like self-reflect and be like, okay, what did I come into this relationship expecting, or what do I believe about a good marriage is, or kind of doing that reflection?
Absolutely. Well, and first, I think before you even like ask what you really want, is you really have to be honest with yourself about those default point of views that you have about, marriage, about men, if you're in a, heterosexual relationship, or about women, and really be honest with them. Like the first few weeks of when we work with our clients, we have them get super honest about all of their complaints and all of their like things that they really believe about marriage. And it's crazy when you start to see that, when you're like, oh my God, I'm in a relationship with my partner, like not believing that, he can provide for me, or I don't trust him, or whatever. Like I'm expecting that, basically. And when you start to really get honest about those, then you can actually look at like, well, what do I want? Like, what are my values? What, is something that inspires me? Like, what did I want before I even met my partner? So, so it really is looking at those complaints and kind of flipping them and asking, like, what is underneath that fear? Because on the other side, because it is all from fear, right? We're always either operating in fear or in love. Mm-hmm. And when we meet our partner initially, hopefully, like, we meet them and we're inspired and we're in love and we, are really like looking forward to this life together. But then as we progress and like we get married or, long-term relationships, we go into these fear kind of places of like, what if this doesn't work out? What if I can't trust him? Whatever, all this stuff. So, so you really want to be honest about what you're afraid of, and then really go to a place of like love and what do I really want?
Awesome. I love that. I'm big into like self-reflection and kind of asking, yourself. I think so many times we kind of move on autopilot and
all
have
the
these
time.
beliefs. Yeah. We don't even realize how they got there in the first place. So kind of just pausing and being like, wait a second, why do I believe this? Or what do I believe? All those questions.
Yeah. And sadly, a lot of times it takes, and I work with women that already come to me and they're at a place where like, I can't take it anymore. I want a divorce, or I want a separation. And, I tell people, like, don't wait till those moments. Self-reflection is something, that inner work that you do is necessary all the time. And especially when you're super busy and on autopilot. And I know as moms, I mean, it's like really hard to get out of that autopilot mode. But if and that's what it takes. That's what it takes for you to actually have that fulfillment.
And so on the other end of things, talking about a more thriving marriage, what's like a powerful foundation that all marriages should try to have a thriving marriage?
There's so much, but I would say the most foundational piece is really being aligned on your why and your purpose. And when I was talking earlier about, we just get into a marriage and we get into this autopilot, and like what we're talking about, like you really don't have a purpose that you're both working towards. And really kind of stepping back as a couple and redefining that is really, really crucial. And I find that when couples do align on their why, on their purpose, and like why they have a family, why they're in a marriage, why, they have kids, right? Not just because they saw their parents and grandparents do it and because society told them to, but really like, what is it for? Then it's beautiful, because when you do have, those moments of hardship and you're going through the seasons of life that really are difficult, you can always come back to the why. You can always come back to your purpose and really, align with it. So yeah, that foundation is really necessary.
We obviously talk about like communication a lot, communication with your partner, and, understanding your goals as a marriage, as parents, and whatever else. So why do a lot of couples fail at healthy communication? What is it about communication that can be more difficult or harder for couples to keep up with?
I mean, communication is a huge topic, but the first thing that I would say about communication is most of us are trying, like, we're communicating to prove our point, and we just want to be right. And therefore we make our partners usually wrong. Like, we want to be seen. All of us, we want to be seen and we want to be heard. So we think that by being right and making the other person wrong, we're going to be seen. And that is such, I think, a broken kind of point of view, because, if two people just want to be right, there's no way that we're going to ever be able to get on the same page. And that's what we want. When I talk to women, like, what do you want in your marriage when it comes to communication? Like, I just want to be seen, I want to be heard, and I want to, be on the same page with my partner. Well, if you're not actually hearing your partner, if you're not allowing him to also be right or her to be right, then there's no way that you guys are going to be able to actually get on that same page. So actually, my husband and I, we have this kind of thing that we just have an agreement that both of us are right. We're always right, and we're always just listening to each other's point of view. And even if I don't agree with it, for him, in his world, like, he's right, and he gets that for me when I'm sharing or when I'm, telling him something that, like, I'm just as right. So he's willing to listen to that. So I think in communication, that's, if couples were just willing to let go of being right and getting defensive, that is huge. And just willing to listen. I mean, another thing, I think communication, we think that just because we're talking, we're communicating, but really communication is about what's already going on inside. So I talked about, most of the time we have these complaints and these fears, and a lot of times we'll communicate from those fears and from those complaints, and nothing actually gets created in the communication. There's no, power in the communication, because we're just basically speaking our complaints out loud. And unfortunately, it happens a lot, I think, especially with women, where we're just like venting and talking and telling our partners what doesn't work. And what happens a lot of times with the men is they shut down, they withdraw, they get defensive, they stonewall, and, they don't want to communicate. And I hear this all the time. And I'm generalizing a little bit. Sometimes it happens the other way, but usually one partner is, the one who's like speaking up their complaints a little more. So what I offer my clients, and just, and everything that I do, is really like getting present to what is my complaint, and then flipping it over and asking, like, what is the desire behind the complaint, and what's my intention before you even open your mouth. And when you do that work, it's really powerful, because when you come to your partner from an intentional place, and, you get really clear on, like, what do I want? Do I want to be heard? Do I want, to solve something? Like, do I want whatever? Then you can actually be responsible for the way you communicate to your partner. And you can, make the request, or you can just ask him to be listened to, or you can actually preempt and tell him, hey, I've been upset about this thing, and I noticed that I've been, complaining about this thing. So what do you think is the solution? So you guys can actually be partners. And it makes such a huge difference when you communicate. So I think, yeah, when it comes to communication, being intentional is huge.
I love that, because I think, yeah, like a lot of times in the heat of the moment, like you just want to state your case or show, like you said, like why you're right. But too, it's like, yeah, what's the end goal? What are you actually asking for, and communicating that, I think, is, yeah, really, really powerful.
Absolutely.
So you also talk about expectations that kind of make us stuck, like we get stuck in these expectations. So what do you mean by that? And how
Gosh,
can people get unstuck? I don't know if that's the right
I
way to say it, but
yeah. Yeah, we put expectations, on our partners and on ourselves. I think, especially as moms. I mean, every woman has like this ideal, I call it the ideal woman in our brain, like we should be this and this and this. But, when it comes to a partnership, a marriage, we have these like invisible check boxes that we a lot of times don't even know that are there. But if you sit down and you really look at every kind of area of a person, from personality to physically, like what should they look like, what should they smell like, what should they, talk like, should he be funny, how much money should he make, all of the different areas. Like really, if you sit down and write it out, you're going to find that you have this bar, right? This like bar that, of what he should be. And inside of a marriage, when your partner isn't meeting those expectations, you will judge him for it. And you will silently, right? I'm not saying, but like consider that there's an inner judgment and an inner criticism based on these expectations that have been learned. I mean, you've learned them, probably since you were a little girl growing up, and, maybe your mom said something, or maybe you saw something on TV, or maybe an ex-boyfriend didn't meet an expectation, whatever it is, like you picked them up all along your life until, this partner. And we silently kind of judge our partners when they meet those expectations and when they don't. So when you get really honest, I mean, that's always like the first step, is really get honest and take responsibility that these are expectations that you have created. You're the only one who has these invisible check boxes. And not that you can't like want these things, but just being honest that this is like the judgment system that your partner is, is kind of against. So, when they don't fill those expectations, we'll judge them and we'll make them wrong. And then when they do, most of the time we're just like, yeah, he should meet them. He should be providing for my family. He should, make this much money so we can whatever. To get unstuck, quote unquote, you're always going to have them, right? They're always going to be there. But I would say is really be honest, take responsibility, and then really, start acknowledging your partner for even the simplest things. It can be, for going to work every day, right? Like when you realize that, oh, I have an expectation that he goes to work every day, and that's like my expectation, right? And I know that sometimes it's hard to understand like that this is your expectation, because society tells us like, no, a man should, be this way. But when you really get like, oh, wow, like that's just me who's created that, you can actually start to get into gratitude and start acknowledging them for doing these things. And it's magical. And, I know that a lot of women that are listening will be like, well, what about him acknowledging me, right? Like I do all these things. Well, we have all of the expectations on ourselves too, of what a mom should be, what a woman should be, how much we should weigh, how we should look, of how many meals we should, all that stuff. So consider that little voice that tells you he should be acknowledging me is your inner critic that's judging yourself for not meeting these specific expectations. And you want him to acknowledge you for that stuff. And when you really get that, and when you start acknowledging your partner, just because what happens, and I see it over and over and over in my programs and women, is your partner starts to acknowledge you just because as well. And they're like, oh, wow, like he starts feeling seen, and he starts feeling like, just like she's just seeing me like for me, and she's grateful for me. And he starts to express that gratitude back. And it's a beautiful thing.
That's awesome. I think, and that kind of goes with what you're saying earlier too, about that self-reflection of understanding like where expectations come from and why do we expect certain things. I like that. I think that's cool because we do hold ourselves to our own expectations of, something we saw in a movie or in our own family, and like, okay, well, this is what I need to be, so this is what, they need to be too. And so for anyone that's kind of listening, that they're curious about, learning more about being a conscious married woman, or, kind of maybe they're having struggles in their relationship right now, what are the kind of starting tips do you recommend? And then where can they get more information from you?
The first thing I would say is really stop looking outside of yourself for answers and start, doing that inner work, and really become curious and observant of how you've been in the relationship and in your life, because there's patterns that are repeating themselves that are showing up, right? And, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and really admit, like, oh, I can actually, have something to do with the way things are. But that's the first place. It doesn't matter. And my husband is freaking amazing. And we still have struggles in our relationship. And it's not until I am looking at myself and really going, like, where is it that, I am showing up in this way? It doesn't matter like how he shows up. It's what I do and my inner work that I do that will really kind of dictate of how I feel and how I show up and my experience of my life. So it's always, that inner work. It always comes back to doing that inner work that will create that deep joy, that deep fulfillment in your life.
Mhm.
And yeah, and if you just shift the context of your marriage to from like, you know, I'm supposed to be fulfilled in this marriage to it's my job to really find my joy and my fulfillment. And this relationship is an opportunity. It's not but is an opportunity for me to learn how to do that. If you just make that mindset shift, you literally like will have a different experience of your relationship.
Yeah, that's awesome. When you're talking about doing the inner work too, it kind of made me think of like if you're having a bad morning and you go home, like something that normally wouldn't bother you can bother you versus if you're having a great day and something happens, it's not a big deal. So it is kind of back to that, like always kind of asking ourselves, like, what's going on, you know, with me right now, kind of what can I do? How can I become a better, better spouse myself is.
Yeah. And, really quickly, the fear, I think a lot for us, for a lot of women, is if I'm doing that work and he's not, then somehow, like, I'm going to be taken advantage of, or, I'm going to be the only one doing the work. I hear this all the time in women. Like, what about him? Like, I've been doing all this work. What about him? He needs to, do the work. And really trust that as a woman, your intuition is guiding you towards doing that work so you can actually live a life that's, full of joy and fulfillment for yourself. And whatever your partner does or doesn't do, he's on his own journey. And a lot of times, what happens with couples, in heterosexual, especially relationship, but in any relationship, I think women, when we start to, find that joy, when we start to actually be responsible for our happiness, our partner also has the space to look at himself as well. Men, believe it or not, if they really love their wife, you know, they want to make you happy. Like it's innate for most men to provide, protect, and make their woman happy. And if he, is on this, like a lot of men, they think like, I'm going to work, I'm doing all these things, I'm providing for my family, she should be happy. And if he doesn't feel that, you are actually happy, he's going to continuously try to focus on that until one day he's going to be like, I can't make her happy, like no matter what. And I'm not saying this, for all men, but I am saying that there is something to be said, like when a woman really is coming from that place of happiness and joy, it really has so much power to influence your partner, your kids. I mean, the whole household can be
Mhm.
influenced by that. So, I tell women, I'm like, it's time for us to be leaders in our families, not to like, you know, be these like feminist, strong women, which that's great and all, but to also like really bring that softness and that grace to your home and really, do that inner work for you so you can heal and you can actually be that space for your family.
Awesome. Yeah, it's like they say, misery loves company. So if you joy spreads, I feel like just as easily. And so if you're
Mm-hmm.
going through something and you're doing the work, I feel like it will spread to the family
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, this was a really awesome conversation. Like I said, we've never had a conversation quite on this topic before. So I think it's something that a lot of our moms will love to hear about. But I always like to end these conversations with fun thinking questions, I call them. And so if you could have a billboard made today, we could share one tip with moms everywhere, what would you have it say?
Hmm. Gosh, I mean, I'm like experiencing this myself, is like have fun. I think we become moms and we take things so seriously, and everything is so like it become I mean, we get so busy and we're like constantly in autopilot. And I know for myself, my husband sometimes will, or my kids will be like, let's just like have some fun. And I'm like, no, I have too many things to do. And that's, I think, the billboard that I would put up is like, remember to have fun and it's not so serious.
I love that. I always say my fiance keeps me fun because he's way more go with the flow, spontaneous and like goofy. And I'm always like, I need
Oh,
to plan everything. So
I know.
it's a nice balance.
Yeah. Yeah. The planning sometimes keeps us safe, but like, in the fun and in that flow is like when the magic happens and we
Yes.
have the most connection with ourselves and with our families.
Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
And of course, where can everyone follow you or find you? What's your website and learn more from you?
Sure. So on Instagram, I am the marriage.coach. And on Facebook, we have a great community called the Conscious Married Community, where you can ask questions and just really hang out in a great community of people. The website for our courses is transformyourmarriagecourse.com.
Awesome. And we'll put
Mm-hmm.
all the links in the show notes so everyone can check those out.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was
Awesome.
so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was awesome. Can't wait to share this. All right, it's time for this week's Mom Tales of the Week. These are questions that we post to our social media to get your take on motherhood, share your funny stories, inspirational thoughts, and so much more. So this week we had amazing answers and responses, so I cannot wait to share some of them with you. If you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself as a new mom? And I love the angle of this question because it's not tell all your advice to new moms. It's really reflecting on yourself. And I don't know, these responses are just really cool to hear. So here we go. All right, number one is Katie Jennings. Breathe. This is only a season. However you are able to feed your child is okay. Breastfeeding is hard. It's a good one. Number two, from Sonia Huerta. Relax. You can do it. Don't be too hard on yourself. You are learning and you are capable, so don't stress. Number three, Liz Schenkel. Shower and put on real clothes every day. It helps you more than you realize. Number four, Nicole Broussard. Don't be afraid to ask for help. When friends or family offer help, they really mean it and just take them up on it. If you think you have postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety, don't be afraid to reach out to your doctor. I suffered for more than 3 years because I was terrified that reaching out would make the doctor label me as crazy and take my kids away. The nurse and doctor I spoke to both told me they'd gone through it as well. I'm so glad I finally got help. This is a huge one, huge. I think so many times we're afraid to reach out for help because we don't want to look weak or like we can't do it. But the truth is we can't always do it on our own. And when people do offer help and offer support, like Nicole says, like take them up on it because it's a powerful thing to be able to ask for help. And you'll be glad when you did. Number five is Annabelle Yang. The dishes can wait. The house can wait. Prioritize yourself and the baby, not the house. Your husband is an adult who can take care of himself. Ask for help. And don't feel guilty that his life has changed because yours did too, and you guys chose this together. That is beautifully said. I see many moms post in the group about feeling alone and feeling guilty asking for help even from their partner because, a lot of times things do fall on the mom and it's unfortunate. So remember to ask her help and those around you will want to help. Number six, Chelsea Stokes. Take lots of pictures. They grow up quicker than you think. Good thing iPhones make that really easy. So take a lot of pictures. Number seven is Renee Rodriguez. And I'm going to read this first part just like she wrote it. Go with the flow.
She put little clapping emojis in between. Who cares if you don't have a strict schedule? Your baby will create their own. So if your baby's cluster feeding, don't stress out. Just accept that it is what your baby needs and enjoy this small moment in time that you will miss someday. It's 12 a.m. and baby's still awake. Well, she's going to be right back up in 2 hours anyways, mama. Just go with it. My baby did make her own schedule. She stopped cluster feeding, and she goes to sleep at night much earlier now. I am happy to have given up the fight instead of stressing out and just accepted and enjoyed my baby. Go with the flow. That's a good one. That's good. You can plan for as much as you want, but at the end of the day, your baby's going to tell you exactly what they need. So I think that was beautifully said. Number 8, Diana Hoffman. Stop Googling everything and reach out for help. This has been a common theme, reaching out for help. And the other thing, stop Googling. So I was actually in an interview this morning where we were talking about information overload, especially in these days. You can Google anything and be extremely overwhelmed, no matter what topic it is. So what I always tell people is before you join a big group or before you look to the internet, have a baseline of what's important to you, what makes sense for you and your family, and then reach out and ask for help. Because if you kind of go in without any ideas and you see 20 different opinions, 20 different ideas, it's going to be very overwhelming. So don't Google every little thing and get everyone else's opinions. Go to the experts when you need it. Go for friends when you need support, or Facebook group when you need support and help. And don't be afraid to reach out for help. I mean, out of these 8 here, and however many we had on Facebook and Instagram, a lot of them had said, don't be afraid to reach out for help. So if I can just reach one person listening today that is maybe thinking, I think it's time I need some help. It's okay. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you a bad mom. In fact, it shows you're strong and you're capable because you're asking for help. So I just want to leave and end this with that kind of encouragement today. And just think to yourself, if you're in the thick of it right now, what advice would you give yourself right now? Sometimes the advice we would give to others is the advice we should give to ourselves, but we're too afraid to take it. So just think about it. What advice would you give to yourself right now if you were a friend looking on? And maybe take it. Sometimes our own advice and our gut instinct is the best advice. So I'm just going to leave it with that. Thanks for tuning in this week, guys, and I will see you next week. Hey, guys, if you found this or any episode of Mom Talks with Christa helpful, please like, comment, subscribe, and of course, share it with your friends. We release new videos every single Wednesday, and our new podcast is out every single Thursday. So lots of different ways you can catch us. And of course, if you're not following us on our socials, go ahead and follow us there. We've got tons of new content for you every single day. And finally, if you're watching this and doubting yourself, you're doing a great job. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.